I'm edgy. I'm an edgelord. I don't make media that I think young girls will enjoy, and I don't want to make media that I think young girls will enjoy. Have you ever seen me actually trying to write good media? That's edgy. So, the trailer for the live-action Winx reboot dropped, and the internet reacted. I personally try to keep an open mind to reboots and remakes. I think the snobbery some people have of looking down on something just because it's a new version of an old thing is very stupid, and I try to keep an open mind to everything. I mean, I still watch pretty much every new Scooby-Doo adaptation and usually love them, and I will defend Be Cool Scooby-Doo until my dying breath. The SpongeBob musical made me sob for like 45 whole ass minutes, and it is an incredible, incredible, incredible show. I even still see almost every Disney live action remake, even though they seem to just progressively get worse and worse and worse, and I try to hold out hope that this next one will be good, actually. Fingers crossed for The Little Mermaid, am I right? I actually bring up the live action Disney remakes because I think the two trends are very similar in a lot of ways. Lindsay Ellis has a fantastic video about how the live action Beauty and the Beast was kind of the apotheosis of that trend, where every element of the previous live action remakes kind of came to a head in a way that kind of sucked. I think Beauty and the Beast is especially notable here because, while most of the other Disney live action remakes primarily sought solely to make like a gazillion dollars, and of course they did, Beauty and the Beast had another prize in mind. The original 1991 Beauty and the Beast was the first animated movie ever to be nominated for Best Picture, and remains the only Disney fairy tale to do so. The other animated movies that have been nominated have been Pixar. So while the other Disney remakes sought to bring nostalgic warmth to the hearts of the fans of the original movies, Beauty and the Beast cared less about the opinions of fans of the 1991 classic or the original fairy tale. What Beauty and the Beast cared about was the opinions of critics, because Disney wanted this movie to finish what the original had started and win that Oscar. Of course, it didn't, and wasn't even nominated because it wasn't very good. But I think that idea, the idea of caring solely for the praise of critics and not of the original target audiences, is one that is very relevant to this discussion. Put a pin in that. I'm coming back to that. Point being, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with remakes or reboots. There are many reboots that I've enjoyed far more than the original source material. To me, a remake can change tons of details, but it should maintain the heart and core of the original material unless their goal is specifically to comment on that original material. I think reboots of cartoons that have more emotional maturity and complexity sounds like it could be something really great. But there's a very specific pattern here. A pattern of remaking media originally targeted at young girls and changing everything about it until it's virtually unrecognizable. Essentially, these shows are being stolen from their target audiences to make them more appealing to the straight, white, male critics. The bright and earnest hearts of these stories have been replaced with gritty cynicism because these men seem to prefer it. I mean, Riverdale constantly scores high Rotten Tomatoes scores, and Riverdale is terrible! And we'll be coming back to Riverdale.
Scary, scary, sexy lady. Angry, scary, sexy lady. Angry like a witch, but sexy like a sexy witch.
Fate, the Winx saga, does not exist in a vacuum. It is far from the first adaptation to darken its source material, and probably won't be the last. So let's talk about a couple notable grimdark adaptations of previously lighter source material, shall we? We begin in 1992 with the theatrical release of the film Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Campy, goofy, girly, and comedic. By all critical accounts, the movie was okay. Not like bad, but not really notably good either. I have seen it, and it's a fun watch. But on the whole, it's just fine. Of course, the image that comes to mind when you hear the words Buffy the Vampire Slayer isn't that of Christy Swanson, who played her in the movie. It's that of Sarah Michelle Gellar. The 1997 series is, by pretty much all accounts, much, much better. It remains one of the most beloved shows of all time, while being a darker, more dramatic version of an originally much sillier movie. But the core of the story, Buffy, a teenage girl who is pushed into this impossible role of the Slayer, stays the same, and so it can darken the original film in ways that improves it, rather than taking away from its original meaning. A big part of this is probably that they were both created by the same man. I do not care for Joss Whedon, But for the purpose of this video, that's kind of irrelevant. He stated that a lot of his original vision for the Buffy movie was changed and dumbed down, and so when he made the TV show, he was able to make something probably a lot closer to his initial vision. This is an early example of a dark adaptation being done not only well, but in a way that's much, much better. And the show became even more female-driven than the movie was. It's objectively a win. Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated was a 2010 reincarnation of the Scooby-Doo franchise, which began in 1969 as Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? It is the first Scooby-Doo series to have a strong running continuity and a major overarching plotline. It remains semi-comedic, but also it has a lot darker drama than any other iteration. There's romance, there's horror, there's complex character drama. Multiple episodes put the gang in actual mortal peril, including an episode heavily inspired by the Saw movies. The horror and drama are significantly amped up, but the story remains at its core about the friendship between these four kids and their lovable talking dog as they solve mysteries together. And the show tries to add more diversity to the franchise as well, giving Velma a subtextual lesbian relationship with a girl named Marcy, or Hot Dog Water. It's the version of the series with the highest IMDb score and remains super popular despite only having 2 seasons. Teen Wolf is an MTV series that began in 2011, starring the incredibly attractive Tyler Posey as Scott McCall. It is inspired by the 80s movie of the same name, but while that movie is a straight-up comedy, and like a sports comedy at that, this version is more horror-tinged. It keeps comedy for sure, and is generally quite funny.
Where are you getting your juice? My mom does all the grocery shopping.
You can do it, Kira. Be a vixen.
But it clearly follows a more Buffy-esque pattern, with big bads and monsters of the weeks and slowly building a supernatural world from the ground up. It's definitely not without its flaws, but it's a fun supernatural show that, for the most part, works. And now we're in the 2010s. I think it's safe to say, we're here.
Scary, scary, sexy lady. Angry, scary, sexy lady.
Riverdale. I'm going to talk about Riverdale. Before I do, though, I think it's important to note that the 3 examples I mentioned previously, while all being flawed, for the most part, worked. They were acclaimed by critics and popular with audiences, and I was in the target demo for both Mystery Incorporated and Teen Wolf, and I absolutely loved them, and still do. I was, not really born when early seasons of Buffy originally aired, but I started watching it when I was around 14, and I was quickly obsessed with this fantastic show. As a whole, these adaptations were popular, both with fans of the original source materials and with the new target audience. That should be the goal for all of these modern, mature adaptations. That is the bar. So let's discuss Riverdale. These other shows I mentioned laid the foundation for this trend, but it is Riverdale that truly kicked it off. If you are somehow blissfully ignorant enough to not know what Riverdale is, it's a modern CW adaptation of the Archie comics. Only instead of wholesome antics and Betty and Veronica love triangles, it's like a murder mystery that posits itself as exploring the darkness beneath these seemingly wholesome tropes. That idea in itself is perfectly good. The idea of a show using common character archetypes and showcasing the darkness beneath those archetypes and how that creates this dark, broody underbelly of a wholesome town is really compelling and could be really great. But Riverdale, well...
It means you haven't known the triumphs and defeats, the epic highs and lows of high school football.
It's a train wreck. It's a train wreck. The female characters do mostly resemble their comic counterparts, just more mature and less cartoony, except Cheryl, who's probably even more cartoony than in the comics and is the best part of the show. Betty is the girl next door, Veronica is the rich bad girl, Cheryl is the rich bad girl, but she's also horny. Yeah, the writing isn't very distinct here, but still, the female characters feel, to an extent, like the same characters they're based on. More human, but the same characters. But Archie, Jughead, Chuck, none of these characters feel anything like the characters they're based on. Archie goes from a clumsy goofball to a sexy football star who's sleeping with his teacher, and I do not even have time to get into Grundy. Jughead goes from hungry Shaggy Rogers knockoff to edgy, broody bad boy who is the worst part of the show. If the thesis of the show is about exploring the darkness hidden beneath these archetypes, Betty is the only character that really applies to it all. She's shown it multiple times to have this dark, dominatrixy bad girl deep inside her, but pretty much every other character is exactly what they seem. And I want to talk about Chuck and Kevin. Chuck Clayton was originally introduced to Archie Comics with the explicit goal of portraying a young black teenager in a positive way. Similarly, Kevin Keller was added to be a positive, hopeful portrayal of a young gay man, again in a positive way. Both of these characters were made so that black and gay teens could see themselves in this popular form of media and feel represented. But the show doesn't really represent them well. At all. In season 1, Chuck is framed as predatory, and pretty much all of the girls he's taken advantage of are white. This is a complex issue, but to simplify it, portraying black men as a threat to white women has tons and tons of historical racist context, and is a really racist plotline on the part of the showrunners. The knife gets twisted further when you remember that, again, Chuck was created to help black teens see themselves in these popular comics, and to teach diversity and tolerance to the white fans of Archie. Riverdale took that character and made him a racist stereotype of a black man preying on white women, which really sucks. And the girl power resolution to that plot point is really peak white feminism. I love the idea of media where women get revenge on shitty men, but the choice to have white blonde Betty be punishing Chuck feels ignorant at best. And Kevin is written as one-dimensionally as possible. He's ultimately an accessory to Betty and Veronica. He's basically the equivalent of an animal sidekick in a Disney movie, mostly just there so the girls have someone to talk to. He might as well be fucking Flounder. This is lampshaded in later seasons, but not in a way that comments on anything or changes it. Saying that you're aware that you aren't giving your gay character any agency or motivation doesn't make it any better that you aren't doing that. It just shows that you're aware of it and don't care enough to change it. The idea of using Archie Comics as a framework to examine these archetypes could be really interesting, especially given the 40s and 50s aesthetics that are so heavily associated with Archie. But this isn't really done. No commentary is really made other than, but what if it was dark? I mean, a Hot Topic kid could do that. This show takes a franchise that has been popular with young girls for decades and tears it apart, claiming that it's motivated by a desire to deconstruct these tropes, but then never actually delivers on this deconstruction. Instead, it demonizes characters of color, tokenizes queer characters, and talks down to the people who have the audacity to enjoy Archie. I love the idea of using these archetypes and the darkness beneath them to make a statement about Archie or just about these tropes in general, but Riverdale doesn't do that, because it's not written competently enough to be able to. Instead, it's just dark for the sake of being dark, because bright and happy and earnest stories for young women are seen as silly and frivolous, and so making it darker inherently means it's better, and actually it's an amazing show. Right?
Scary, scary, sexy lady. Angry, scary, sexy lady. Angry like
The success of Riverdale is
sexy
undeniably
like a
part of the reason
sexy-
shows like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and this new Winx adaptation are being made. Clearly, grimdark reboots of innocent media for young girls are profitable. Enter the Winx remake. The Winx Club was originally developed because so many popular cartoons at the time centered around male characters. The creator wanted to create a story that centered around a group of teenage girls, featuring coming-of-age elements and magical fun world building. Actual fashion designers from Dolce & Gabbana were utilized to make sure that the girls' style was stunning, and the show became popular with tons of girls and boys upon release. Theoretically, a live-action remake could be really great. It could be a great opportunity to lean more heavily into the character drama, have the characters be more nuanced and human and a little less cartoony, and have some real threats for conflicts and antagonists while still keeping a lighter, magical tone. Think early Buffy, magical and comedic, while still using these supernatural elements as the backdrop for really compelling, character-driven drama. But the trailer looks darker than that. Honestly, I'm convinced that if you took a handful of clips from the trailers for Sabrina, The Craft Legacy, and this Winx adaptation and mixed them together, you could easily convince someone that they're the same show. Which is weird because Sabrina is like horror and The Craft is about witches. A show about fairies shouldn't be visually indistinguishable from horror media or thriller media about witches. There's just a lot to discuss here. Let's start with the good. The original Winx Club show had a fairly diverse cast, but it also had some really problematic moments.
According to Strophe, the girls were each designed to resemble a famous celebrity of the time, with Britney Spears being the inspiration for Bloom, Cameron Diaz for Stella, Jennifer Lopez for Flora, Pink for Tecna, Lucy Liu for Musa, and Beyoncé for Aisha.
Aisha is based on Beyoncé. She is visibly black. That, theoretically, is great, to have a show with 3 non-white main characters, but they didn't always do well with their representation.
To spell.
I got it wrong! I said voice instead of choice! Maybe it's not that bad!
Oh, that's awful! I didn't mean that!
The clip I just showed is pretty frickin' racist. Portraying black hair is undesirable, and having a black girl literally cry about having an afro. And in newer seasons of the show, Aisha, the only black character as far as I know, has her skin significantly lightened. She barely looks black anymore, and this is a real problem we see in media a lot, especially animation. One of my favorite shows of all time is the 2019 reboot of DC Superhero Girls, and it's amazing in almost every way, except the lightening of Bumblebee's skin tone. This happens in live action as well. A recent high-profile example is Amanda Steinberg being cast as the lead in the Hate U Give adaptation, despite the character on the cover of the book having much darker skin. Similar casting choices were made in the adaptation of the Cheetah Girls. This colorism is a kind of less noticeable version of whitewashing. They're still played by black actors, so most white audience members won't make note of the fact that the character's skin is being lightened. But many casually racist people feel a little less uncomfortable around black people with lighter skin. It's similar to straight people who say things like, "I'm fine with gay people, but don't shove it in my face." Casual bigots feel less uncomfortable around people that are less different from them. This is colorist, and one thing that this new adaptation does that is unequivocally a good thing is casting a dark-skinned actress to play Aisha in this new series. It's really nice to see a dark-skinned black woman in a Netflix series in general, since Netflix has kind of become known for mostly casting lighter-skinned actresses, and I really look forward to seeing Precious Mustafa's portrayal of Aisha. They also have a plus-size actress, and the cast in general has much more realistic body types than that of the cartoons. The animated Winx definitely falls into the common cartoon trope of giving the girls impossibly thin bodies, and it's lovely to see some more body diversity in this remake. Unfortunately, though, those 2 good points also directly lead into the bad, so let's talk the bad. I am so glad that they cast a dark-skinned actress to play Aisha, but the 2 other women of color in the original series, Musa and Flora, have been whitewashed. I commented on being happy that a plus-size actress has been cast, and I am, but the character in question is Tara, a replacement for Flora, who is a Latina character, and the actress playing Tara is not Latina. It's more than a little frustrating to see Netflix take 2 steps in the right direction, only to just take 2 right back. In terms of diversity, Precious Mustafa is the only woman of color in the main cast. I'm so glad that they cast her, but in 2020, it is ridiculous to have a show made up of almost entirely white girls and only 1 black girl. The original show definitely had faults in its diversity department, but it was still more diverse than this. It's really disappointing. And also on the bad side is the showrunner's disdain for some key elements of the original series. He states, "It was the most important thing to me that every kid can feel like they see themselves in it. Real girls, real people." This is lovely in sentiment, but if that was the case, shouldn't the cast be more diverse than the original instead of less? If every kid is to see themselves in the story, then there should be so much more diversity. In the same interview, he says that boys can be fairies, and as a boy who loved Winx so deeply when I was little, that means a lot to me. I remember calling myself a fairy because of the show, and my parents telling me that was something boys couldn't be. Aggressively girly media, like Winx, helped me feel okay with my own femininity, even though the world around me told me I was a freak for it. But despite this, I haven't seen anything to imply the existence of queer characters in the show or the challenging of this gender role of boys not being fairies. Of course, it hasn't aired yet, and maybe there will be, but if you're going to say every kid should see themselves in it, that should include gay kids. I saw myself in the original Winx. I would love to see myself in this one.
Scary, scary, sexy lady. Angry, scary, sexy lady.
I want to be very clear. I don't have anything against the idea of dark reboots of traditionally light media on an inherent level. I mentioned Buffy, Teen Wolf, and Mystery Incorporated as examples that I think were great. I think the idea of modernized reboots in general can be a great one, and can be a great chance to create remakes that course-correct problematic elements from the original. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Had a lot of racist characters as villains, including multiple Native American ghosts, yikes, and other racist elements. Mystery Incorporated leaves that behind entirely, which is definitely a good thing. They also leave behind the queer-coded villains, give Velma a girlfriend, and add some supporting characters of color, although I would still love to see some of the gang made people of color. The movie of Teen Wolf was pretty much entirely white and straight, whereas the TV show has a Latino lead and some supporting gay characters. Buffy's movie does a lot worse in terms of gender than the show, which remains a bastion of feminist television despite its many faults. And even if the remake isn't made with the intention of fixing problematic elements, it can be interesting to see characters from a cartoon in the real world, with more nuanced personalities and relatable struggles. I really promise I don't have anything against dark reboots. It can and should be possible to make a new version of an older piece of media with more complex emotional drama, more realistic stakes, and a darker tone. My problem comes from the motivations behind making the story darker. I mentioned Disney's live-action remakes before, remember? You probably don't, that was a large number of minutes ago, but I said that I think one of the biggest faults of the Beauty and the Beast remake was that it was determined to fix every fault of the animated movie to try and win the Best Picture Oscar. This is something we've seen with pretty much every Disney remake since Beauty and the Beast. Not specifically the Oscar part, that part was definitely specific to Beauty and the Beast, but the attempt to overcorrect issues with the original movies and pretend that they just weren't there, despite the fact that these are inevitably underthought out and result in issues of their own. Correcting problems is definitely not a bad thing. I mean, I just said that I wish this Winx adaptation would correct more of the issues from the cartoon. The issue here is the motivation for these corrections. They aren't updating these problematic elements in an attempt to make truly right with the people they've marginalized. That much is clear from the way they dealt with these changes. In regards to the female characters, the change is usually made very evident and very obvious, while still not affecting the major plot in any significant way. Jasmine sings 2 whole songs about how empowered she is, while Belle is given the illusion of more agency, but it doesn't go anywhere. Neither of these changes significantly impact the story, they just make it feel like it's impacting the story. What does Belle being the inventor actually matter? Why does Belle making her laundry machine actually affect the story? It doesn't. These changes are lip service and kind of nothing more. And in regards to race and sexuality, the problematic parts are just removed. The racist crows from Dumbo? Gone in the remake with no attempt to comment on them at all. The queer coding of the villains? Gone in The Lion King, with a more toned-down masculine Scar. They pick and choose which ones to highlight because they know which ones will make them look better. Using girl power feminism, they can easily turn their princesses into #girl bosses, and they really want you to praise them for that. But at the same time, they just try to shove their racist and homophobic history under the rug. This is because queer characters in children's movies aren't really marketable in the same way quote-unquote empowered women are. People will complain, it'll get banned. It's much easier to just pretend that there was never anything homophobic in the movie to begin with than to comment on it and make genuine change. Hence, fucking LeFou. They handle race similarly. They just don't want to be held accountable for their racist past, so they kind of just pretend the racism was never there. To genuinely, truly make commentary on their misogynistic, racist, or homophobic past, they would have to genuinely change the stories on fundamental levels in their remakes. They make a conscious choice to give these movies to straight white directors, including movies that shouldn't be. Aladdin and Mulan were both directed by white people. I mean, Mulan was at least directed by a woman, but it should have gone to a Chinese director. It might have been good if it had gone to a Chinese director. But they don't want to do that. They want to lampshade feminism and ignore racism and homophobia so that no one will criticize them. Why? Because these remakes aren't really for fans of the original movies. I mean, that's the target audience, but that's not who they think will like them. They're for critics. And money, but that's less related to this conversation. These changes aren't made out of a genuine desire to represent people better. They're made because they want to erase criticism. But they don't go as far as they could to make actual change because they want praise from straight white male critics who might get uncomfortable if the change is too drastic. And that's something this trend of Disney remakes and the trend of edgy grimdark reboots have in common. These stories are stripped of their girliness and levity because comedic girly shows are written off as stupid and frivolous and unnecessary. Think of the way men talk about movies they deem chick flicks. Tons of straight men will watch all sorts of silly and goofy media about men, but if you ask them to watch Clueless, they'll write it off as a chick flick, even though Clueless is a fantastic movie. I'm not saying every time a girly TV show is rebooted into something darker, it's because the creator doesn't respect young women. I mean, Buffy was made by the same guy both times, and the show presumably was much closer to his original vision. But there's a pattern here of media that was made to be fun for young girls to enjoy, being made to be darker and grittier because straight male critics won't take it seriously otherwise. I love the idea of a world-building, fantastic, epic high fantasy series about a group of teenage girls. If you were solely to tell me the premise of this adaptation, I would be all for it. But statements from the showrunners' lack of diversity and disdain for girly media makes me much more wary. Will I check it out? Probably. I want to be wrong, and if I am, I'll be overjoyed. But I fear I won't be.
Scary, scary, sexy lady. Angry, scary, sexy lady. Angry like a witch.
Paddington, Power Rangers 2017, the Addams Family 1991, and the live-action Scooby-Doo movies prove that you can remake cartoony media and keep the cartoony aspects, and the movies will be widely beloved. Buffy, Teen Wolf, and Mystery Incorporated prove that you can reboot goofy stories into more serious ones without disrespecting what made the originals great. The problem here isn't that these stories are just becoming darker. It's that they're being made darker for no real narrative reason. Riverdale claims to have a reason, but never delivers on it. It seems more like these shows are just being darkened because lighthearted media for young girls gets looked down upon. I mean, it's seen as completely normal for a man to be invested in sports, but if a woman is super invested in a reality TV competition, she gets mocked. Things associated with femininity and with queerness are seen as stupid by a lot of straight white men. I'm not saying all of them, and I'm not saying it's inherently wrong to not like a genre or anything like that. But looking down on something just because it's popular with young girls and gay boys is not okay. Silly media targeted at young girls is mocked, so it has to be dark and edgy and broody and cynical, even if being those things makes it worse. It's disrespectful. I'm not going to straight up say that the new Winx series will fall into these pitfalls, because it isn't out yet, but elements of it seem to be pointing that way. I have hope that it will surprise me and be the mature but still magical adaptation I've hoped for. These fairies meant a lot to me when I was little and had a big role in me being okay with me being gay. I hope this new show connects with people the same way that one did with me. But unfortunately, at the time being, it seems it's forgotten the first rule of remakes. I'll let Sidney Prescott finish this one out.
Don't fuck with the original.